Today, we're going to be talking about the economy in 2.2. And by itself, the economy has quite a lot of facets, as you may have encountered already. It can be incredibly difficult to navigate if you don't know what you're doing, and that's why we're going to be talking about this particular subject today. So I've set up this empire here that has a general good overview of what is available within an economy and how things are going. Basically boil things down to its specifics. An economy consists out of your population and its total output. Now that by itself may be incredibly straightforward, but within Stellaris, obviously nothing is always straightforward. Therefore, we're going to dive deep into what is up. So, our economy is broken up into several tiers. Now, the tiers by themselves start at their basis. We have energy, we have got minerals, and we have food. These three are the cornerstone of any economy, and that is what we're going to be doing our initial focus on. Of course, we have consumer goods, alloys, and of course, strategic resources, which are all of these. Now, by themselves, basically what you need to think here is this is a pyramid. At the bottom, we have our basic resources, then we have our intermediaries, and then our advanced resources. That's kind of how you have to think about it. And where do these resources come from? Well, let's take a look at one of our planets in our outliner, of course. Let's go to Earth here. And let's take a look at what our population has to offer for us. Now, the jobs in the population are listed here. We got our workers, we have our specialists, and we have our rulers. These are generally referred to as strata. Once again, using a pyramid example, the rulers are at the top, then is our specialists, and at the bottom is, of course, the workers. The workers by themselves are the production of all the basic resources, whether it's food, minerals, energy, and in this particular case, amenities and trade value. Now, amenities and trade value are a separate system, and we will be covering this shortly, but for now, we're going to be focusing on food, minerals, and energy. Now, these items, especially minerals, are being moved into the specialist department once we have them, and of course, once we have those specialists themselves, and then those get produced into either consumer goods, your technology, your unity, and some culture workers such as crime, alloys, and there we get technology here, and in this particular case also robots, because robots are basically additional units in your empire that help you produce more stuff. Effectively a replacement for your workers. They're quite good, and you should be using them if you want to have a decent time and you have a large influx of minerals, but it can cause some problems with spiritualist empires. At the top, of course, we have our rulers. Our rulers are our administrators, merchants, and other variables, and they produce large amounts of unity, amenities, as well as some trade value in the merchant category. Now, first of all, we're going to need to talk about planets and how to set those up. Once again, if we go to our capital, this is our capital world. This is the first planet we started out with. We got a various amount of population here. If we go to the planet summary tab, and we got a reasonable amount of districts set up. Now, your first planet will always have a general layout in terms of districts, whether it be energy, minerals, or food. And until you start specializing your planets, this is going to be your mainstay and your final backup. This is also in the late game going to be the place where most of your technology is going to come from, at least if that's how you want to play it. Some of your most of your trade value is going to come from here, but like I said, trade value is something we're going to be touching on separately. So, what kind of types of planets do we have? Well, we have, for instance, our generator worlds. Generator worlds, in this particular case, are worlds completely covered with generator districts and is completely specialized on building as much energy as possible. In this particular case, we could possibly divest this particular world into agriculture as well, considering we have more than enough districts available. But right now, our population's on it, and as you can see at the top, our energy is not in a particular good scenario either, so we want to keep this as a generator world for now. Then we have our urban worlds. Urban worlds are generally depicted by having very small amounts of districts. This is the kind of world that we want to have mostly city districts on, and it's going to be a main output for trade value. Trade value, once again, is going to be one of the items we're going to be touching on shortly. So that trade value then gets channeled to our capital world, or at least our main trade hub. And worlds like this, well, they are generally, like I said, low on districts and high on cities. Now, one thing that is very important, and you may have already noticed this, just because there are open building slots does not necessarily mean that you should be building buildings in those. Buildings are generally used by specialists, and specialists are recruited from your workers. So for instance, if you have a bunch of specialist positions open in your empire, then those will be automatically filled by workers. And this can seriously impact your economy if you're not being careful. For instance, let's say I build 2 more additional buildings here, say a monument and a civilian industry. That monument will automatically have 2 additional culture jobs and 2 additional artisan jobs for the civilian industry, which means that 4 workers from this particular tier will move away. This can cause serious problems, especially if, for instance, your miners, if in this particular scenario we only really have 1 available, move into those slots, and all of a sudden your economy will flatline. That's why you want to be really, really careful when it comes to your population, when it comes to building more buildings. Always make sure that you have enough available jobs available, or at least enough workers available to fill jobs on your worlds. Try to not overdevelop your worlds, and especially be really careful with building slots. If you want to have a planet that specifically focuses on one thing, in this particular case trade value, then just build city districts and anything that improves trade value on your worlds. So for instance, commercial zones, which will add additional clerks, especially in this scenario. But as you can see, this planet is not ready, and also we have 2 units without any jobs, and that's because these units are not specifically set up properly for this world. Specifically, these are food robots, and we don't have any agricultural districts on this world. Therefore, these robots cannot find any jobs. Let's take a look at some of our other worlds. For instance, this agri world. An agri world is only one goal, and that is produce as much food as possible. You don't want to overbuild on these in any of the other categories until you have filled out your agricultural districts and have food processing facilities or farms available on those planets. And once again, if you don't have enough pops available, don't build any buildings, because they will steal valuable workers away and turn them into specialists, and that is something we definitely do not want. On top of that, I believe we don't have a robot facility here, so we should probably build one at some point. We have enough food so we can easily support that, and then some of those workers will turn into specialists and into robots, and then those robots will start working in the fields. On top of that, we have a mining world. A mining world in this particular scenario, it does not have a lot of districts, and in this particular case, it does look like it's going to be a trade value world in the long run, but right now it has a lot of mining districts on it and workers specifically catering to that. And also, what is very important is the particular modifiers that are happening on those worlds at said time. So we have, for instance, a mineral modifier. So in this particular case, a asteroid belt. It generates additional mining districts. If we didn't have this modifier, there wouldn't be any districts whatsoever, just a city district. Then we may as well turn this into a trade world. But at least we're getting a 10% bonus on minerals being generated here by our workers, which is in this case over 50, and we have nothing but robots in here. And in 1 slot available, we can, for instance, say, hey, I want a little bit less priority here, so let's just set a minus here, and one of those pops will immediately move into a miner job, and we'll start mining and add those to our production. So that right there is already very good. On top of that, we got some more mining worlds here. We got our colony worlds, which is basically your worlds that just have a reassembled ship shelter on it. It's not particularly great. It does not have enough pops yet to be considered a particular type of world. But this right here is a Gaia world, which is all the way down here, and it has a lot of different types of tiles available. Of course, we only have 14 districts available at the moment, but we can basically mold this planet into any type of world that we want. In this particular case, you really wouldn't turn this into an ecumenopolis. That's only, of course, if you have Megacorp, but overall, this is looking pretty good. So, we have our planets, we have our generator worlds, we have our urban worlds, we've got our capital world, we got our agri world, and our mining worlds. Now, all of these are all laser focused on one target. And once again, you don't want to have any buildings up if you don't have the population to support it, because your economy will nosedive. So far, so good, I would say. Obviously, singular districts on singular worlds, and then focus on things. So let's talk a little bit about trade value. Now, trade value by itself is an item I feel that a lot of people are overlooking, but it is incredibly powerful. Trade value is the inherent value of your economy. Basically, it's a tax being done on your civilians as they move goods back and forth between private organizations. Now, trade value, as I quickly click on this button, is generated either in space, like in here, or on planets. Now, trade value by itself may not seem like a very important thing, but I can guarantee you that it most definitely is. So let's quickly pop over towards our policies and illustrate why this is the case. So some of our worlds, in this particular case Earth, is generating 50 trade value. We got 50 here on Alpha Centauri. This is going to be a trade value world in the long run. We got some stuff here, we got some stuff here, and overall it's all funneling back to good old Earth in order to turn it into a giant pile of trade value. Now, trade value by itself, as we click on this button here, right now we're generating 188 trade value. Now, what is this actually used for? If we go to our trade policy, this is what really specifies what we're using our trade value on. For instance, we have wealth creation. Wealth creation turns every item of trade value into 1 unit of energy. So if your economy is struggling, like in this particular case, then you may want to go for this and just crank out nothing but energy and use that energy to buy resources on the market as such. So for instance, hey, we're low on alloys, we want to have energy so we can buy some more alloys because our output is relatively low, so that's maybe an option there. So for instance, if I go to our policies right now and I turn on wealth creation, and we'll need to have the months tick over, which is going to take a very short while.
Construction complete.
Then basically, if we keep an eye on our economy up here, boop, all of a sudden we have 123 energy pumping into our economy. Now, we can't change this until 10 years later, so be very careful about what your actions are going to be. Also, wealth creation by itself may be an incredibly attractive thing to do if you're like, hey, I don't want to really specify my economy and I want to be really, really careful about overbuilding and stuff like that. That's fine, but just be aware that if you have only wealth creation at the start of the game, that there is a good chance that your trade value, if you go for one of these other ones, for instance, consumer benefits, which gives us only 50% of energy and 0.25 consumer goods, then you may, and you switch to one of these, or for instance, marketplace of ideas, which gives you a ton of unity, then you may be looking at an economy that is going to slap on its ass very quickly. So be incredibly careful about your trade policy. Yes, consumer benefits and marketplace of ideas. Marketplace of ideas is, for me, pretty much a de facto go-to. And if in times of low energy income, going back to wealth creation is maybe a way of doing things, but be really, really careful about wealth creation, especially if you want to use consumer benefits or marketplace of ideas at some point in the future. Then, of course, we have our economy policy. Now, economy policy is built into 3 categories. We got our civilian economy, we got our mixed economy, and we got our militarized economy. So our civilian economy increases consumer goods. Relatively straightforward, but also reduces the amount of alloys we produce by 25%. Mixed economy is a mix. There is no bonuses or penalties. And we got our militarized economy if we want to reduce the income of consumer goods and increase the amount of alloys we're producing. Now, considering I am in a war right now, let's militarize our economy and watch our consumer goods absolutely crash, but our alloys go up fairly significantly. Well, significantly, he says it's now plus 17, and our consumer goods are completely through the floor. So by itself, unless you're already generating a reasonable amount of alloys, it's probably not a good idea to go for a militarized economy, and keep it on a mixed economy is probably a better idea. Now, let's talk a little bit about the usage of pops. Now, pops by themselves, as you can see in the outliner here, are defined by whether or not they have jobs or not. As you can see on Alpha Centauri right now, the little suitcase, with the little red suitcase at least, is saying, hey, there's 2 pops unemployed here. And that, of course, in this particular case, makes no sense because we have more than enough jobs available, as well as we have a fairly small for its population. So if we go into the population, we see that our unemployed workers right now are currently robots, and these particular robots are specifically focused on building food, or at least harvesting food. If you look on our planet, you can see that we don't have any agricultural districts here. So why were these robots built here in the first place? I have no clue, but they're still there, which means that we're going to need to move them somewhere where they are required. So if we look at this planet, for instance, this is our world for agricultural districts, and we're currently building a food processing facility here. What we can do here is see, hey, okay, so let's have a quick look at our population. And we can see that we have some jobs available in farms. 2 of them exactly, which is great because that means that we could move these pops that are currently without jobs over towards this planet in order to get them to work. So let's go to resettle, and let's go to the drop down here. The left side is the planet we currently have selected, and on the right side is the world list that we have, and we have our world right here. Let's take a look. That's our world, and we can see that, yeah, we have a bunch of farmer jobs available here based on the outliner as it is right here. Let's take a look here. Was it this one? It was Secundus. Okay, so it's Secundus. Yeah, we got 2 jobs available. There's 3 housing units available here. So let's click on that and then move these pops over. Now these pops, moving them over, the unemployed ones down here, is going to cost us 100 energy per pop, which by itself is fairly expensive, but at least we will have these jobs open, being used right now, and our food income, once we go to the end of the month, should increase.
Construction finalized.
And there you go. So those robots are now producing a larger amount of food. Specifically in this case, they are producing 8.6 food per pop. So if you're in a scenario where you think by yourself, okay, I have pops available on worlds that are not working, or a certain world needs to output more resources a lot quicker, then it would probably be a good idea to reallocate pops from one world to another, because it's generally cheaper than to just build a district for, say, 200 or 300 minerals. And even then, it's not always the case that those districts are going to be available on those worlds. So in the meantime, let's take a look at our consumer goods. Now, consumer goods are materials that are being produced on planets, and they are basically consumer goods. They are what they basically imply. They are your washing machines, they are televisions, they are your hyper-realistic real dolls. You get the general idea. Now, if we hit 0 on these, then we're going to be in some trouble. However, considering we have an overabundance of energy available, as well as minerals, it means that we can use these resources to float our economy for now, and actually go to our market, and then go, say, to our food, sell some food, and then just buy some consumer goods until our market has stabilized. And that right there is going to be really important. Playing the market is very important in Stellaris 2.2 in order to get resources quickly, stabilizing, floating your economy. Just because it's minus 35 is not the end of the world. You can still build stuff, especially considering the second tier buildings require strategic resources, in this particular case, rare crystals. And that by itself is a problem, especially if you're relatively early game and you don't have access to those materials yet. You can use the basic materials to sell them on the market and float your economy using those. And that by right there is effectively how the economy system works. By itself, it seems very complicated, and it's not. It's all about making sure that your population is not you don't have too many buildings for your population, because all your basic workers will turn into specialists. You really want to avoid that. You want to have as many workers on the ground as you can before you go into specialists. And like I said, specialists come from buildings. And that right there is rather important. In addition, the policies, economic policy and trade policy, is very important to keep an eye on, depending on how you want to run your economy. You want to generate a ton of money? Wealth creation is the way to go. You want to have some money and a reasonable amount of consumer goods? Go for trade value. Go for marketplace of ideas if you want to have a lot of unity. It's generally a good idea to start out with that at the start of the game. Now, with trade value, like I mentioned before, it's all being generated on planet by clerks. And let's have a quick look here. Yeah, we got a couple of clerks here generating a little bit of trade value, and that is fine. Once you get to the mid-game and you unlock, for instance, the Ecumenopolis Archaeology project, you can generate an insane amount of resources. And that right there is something you want to aim towards if you want to have a stable economy in the late game. Ecumenopoli, of course, I know they're only available to Megacorp owners, or if you get the first league, or if you take it from a fallen empire, are so powerful when it comes to your economy. They're basically generating free alloys, free consumer goods, and as well as trade value. You want to keep your eye on that as well. So yeah, in short, keep your base resources in the highs. They are your lifeline. If you run into any problems, money-wise or consumer-wise or alloys-wise, just sell a stack of these on the market and buy what you need. And that right there is pretty much all you should know about the basics of the economy in Stellaris. We're going to go and wrap this one up here. Next time, what should we talk about? Well, we'll see. Until next time, take good care of yourself, and as always, eat sharp.